Hi everyone, it's Lauren. I'm very excited to say that I'm going to be doing some work with the Bailey's Prize for Women's Fiction this year, which means I'm going to be reading all 6 of the shortlisted books. I'm going to be vlogging from the award ceremony on the 8th of June, and until then, I'm going to be filming some book reviews, some discussions about the books and the prize in general. So today I've got 2 book reviews for you from that shortlist, and the first one I'm going to be talking about today is The Improbability of Love by Hannah Rothschild. This is a really fun book. It's about a woman called Annie who discovers an old painting in a junk shop, which then turns out to be an undiscovered masterpiece. And it's a really interesting look at the art world. It starts at the end. You start at the auction for the painting, which is going to be the biggest auction ever and set new records for amounts spent on a single painting. And you see all the different people that are going to this auction. They all want to buy the painting for very different reasons. You get a glimpse into the auction house and the people that are selling the painting, and then from there you go to 6 months earlier when Annie originally discovers the painting, and you see all the twists and turns and how we got to that point. The overall tone of this book really reminded me of The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton, which is interesting because this is not as literary as The Luminaries. It's very much more of a fun, enjoyable read. However, the way she has such a huge cast of characters who are all coming together to this final point, which you already know, but you're unsure how we get from the start to the finish. And all of the characters interact with each other at various different occasions, and the stories are sort of overlapping and twisting around. That element of it really reminded me of The Luminaries. This is a bit of a mystery book in its own way, and there are some various plot twists, which I was genuinely interested in, and it really was a page turner. I kind of wanted to know what was happening. I wanted to know what secrets might be uncovered. This is a painting which is very important to different people for lots of different reasons, some sentimental, some family secrets that maybe don't want to come out, and everybody has reasons for either purchasing it, wanting it destroyed, wanting it covered up. And finding out everybody's reasons and everybody's backstory, I thought was really interesting. At the same time as uncovering maybe a more unscrupulous side of the art world, this is actually a very loving and teasing look at the art world as well. Hannah Rothschild is the chairman of the National Gallery, so she knows this world incredibly well. A lot of the characters are very eccentric and flamboyant, and others are just perhaps strong caricatures of people she knows, and in that way it's really funny and really fun. The only thing I would say is a lot of the characters in here are very two-dimensional. Even Annie, our main protagonist, really, there's not much to her. But then this isn't really meant to be a deep psychological study of people. This is very much more plot-driven. And something else that I really liked as well was how much this book made me want to learn a bit more about art. The painting in here is fictional, but the artist that painted it is real. And a lot of works of art that are mentioned in this book are real as well. And it made me look them up. I wanted to know what these paintings looked like. I wanted to understand who this artist was. And a lot of the characters in here have such a genuine love for art and the power of a beautiful object that it really made me want to learn a little bit more about it. So I was really surprised about this book. I think there was a lot more to it than perhaps I had given it credit for to begin with. And I found it to be really fun, really readable, and I actually sort of feel like I've learned something at the end of this. And the second book that I have to talk to you about today, which unfortunately was not such an enjoyable read for me, was Ruby by Cynthia Bond. This book is really hard to describe without giving the plot away, so I'm just going to read what it says on the back of the book. Ephraim Jennings has never forgotten the beautiful girl with the long braids running through the piney woods of Liberty, their small East Texas town. For Ruby Bell, Liberty was a place of devastating violence from which she fled to seedy, glamorous 1950s New York. Years later, pulled back home, 30-year-old Ruby is faced with the seething hatred of a town desperate to destroy her. Witnessing her struggle, Ephraim must choose between loyalty to the sister who raised him and the chance for a life with the woman he has loved since he was a boy. So yeah, this is about a girl called Ruby who escapes from her Texan town to New York and then has to come back home. And it details the violence that she was subjected to and what she ran away from, what her life was like in New York. And at the beginning of the book, when she's now back in Liberty, the town thinks she's kind of gone mad and she's living on her own in this empty house. So you also get the history of her parents and her family and where she's come from, and a bit of an idea of the history of the town as well. While that description does explain the plot of Ruby, I kind of wasn't really prepared for what the actual story would be like. So having read it, I think there's two sides of this book which I didn't really expect. On one side, this book is about child abuse, it's about human trafficking and what that does to a person and the specific vulnerability experienced by Black women. And then on the other side, you have this sort of magical realism element, but I'm hesitant to call it magical realism because to me, magical realism as a style is about when strange and fantastical things are happening and the characters in the book are either unaware of it or it's unexplained or you're not really sure if it's real or not. But the magical realism in Ruby is much more like actual magic, so cultish, occultish religious beliefs and people casting spells and hexes, talking about souls and ghosts. And so I'm not really sure what box this fits into in that sense. I will say for me that I felt like too much was going on in this book, and that was probably my problem with it. I think the different writing styles that Cynthia Bond employs throughout the book perhaps took away from something that could have been quite powerful if it didn't feel so crowded. Parts of the book that were focused more on the magical elements I found really hard to follow sometimes, and I wasn't really sure what she was driving at. And then on the other hand, there is some symbolism in here which I felt was quite heavy-handed and quite laboured, and so I'm not really sure if she got the balance right between what she tells you as an audience member and what she doesn't tell you. However, there are some moments of really beautiful writing in here, and the story in itself is very important, and I can see what she's doing. I just think that the way this book is structured is probably going to be something you either are on board with and you really like, or something you can't really get on with, and I was in the latter category. I don't think this is a book that lots of people would hate by any means. I think it's just something that wasn't for me, and there is beauty in it, and there are also a lot of sections that I did find quite moving. The only thing I would say to someone thinking about picking up this book is that I would give a massive trigger warning for child abuse, for rape, for general violence. If those are things that you struggle reading about, then they are prevalent all the way through the book. But like I said, at its heart, there is something very beautiful, very mournful in here. But I would love to hear from anyone who has read it, because I think this is going to be a little bit of a love or hate book, to be honest. And that goes for the improbability of love as well. If you've read either of these books, I'd be really interested in hearing from you. I think this is a very, very varied and interesting shortlist that the Bailey's judges have picked, because you have something like Ruby and A Little Life, which are very sort of harrowing tales, and then at the same time the improbability of love, which is just a complete and utter romp. So it's going to be very hard for even me to make my mind up which book I think should win this prize. I don't know what the judges are going through at the moment, but as I said, would love to hear your thoughts on either of these books or any of the shortlist. If you're new, you can subscribe by clicking the red button just underneath the left hand corner of this video, and I will see you next time. Bye! I really enjoyed this collection. It's 11 short stories, all of which focus on the themes of growing up, and not necessarily growing up, more like the loss of innocence, kind of the moment you realise the world is more complicated than maybe it seemed, the moment people lose their naivety.